Well, good evening, everybody. This is Rick Seymour. My lovely wife and myself have been ambassadors for Shackley for 51 plus years, and we're going to share a little bit of information about some things we all need to think about in order to maintain our health and to have the kind of longevity and aging that I think we all desire to have. So, we're going to talk about protein, leucine, creatine, and cellular energy tonight, all of which sort of relate to each other and kind of connect as we start thinking about how we go forward with all this stuff. And if I can get that to change, here we go. So, we're going to start with muscle preservation. Dr. Gabriel Lyon, who was an amazing keynote speaker at our last conference, talked about the fact that muscle is the organ of longevity. It affects everything, not just what we normally think about muscle, but it affects our cognition, our brain, our focus, our energy, everything is related to it. And it makes a huge difference in how we age. It supports our metabolism, our balance, and our long-term independence. And there are a lot of us on this call that's becoming more and more important to us. Loss of lean muscle mass can occur during aging or reduced calorie intake if somebody's on a diet, or the reality is the vast majority of Americans do not get adequate protein. It is the fuel that builds lean muscle, and it has to be very strategic because the reality is it's difficult to achieve. In fact, if you look at what goes on over time with muscle loss, at about age 30, everything's wonderful. By age 40, we're losing to 3 to 8% of our muscle mass. Age 50, 10%, 15% at age 60, 40% at age 80, if we're not very conscious, intentional about what we do with our diet. And I don't think any of us want to be down here where they're talking about frailty and weakness and difficulty walking and high risk of falls. It does not need to be that way. But I think we need to realize that for the longest time, what was considered the RDA for protein was too low. Now, everybody's talking about the fact that we need to get at least 100 grams of protein a day. It's hard to do. If you paid any attention, if you use Shackley's protein tracker, if you're very intentional about adding up how much you're getting throughout the day with the various meals and supplements and smoothies and everything else you do, achieving 100 grams is tough. And if you look down there in the lower right hand corner, a 200-pound man really needs 130 to 150 grams of protein every single day. And that's almost impossible to do without being extraordinarily intentional about it. So, having said that, it's not just about protein. It's not just about protein versus calories. It's also about what we're going to call the trigger. Because, yes, protein provides the essential amino acids needed for building muscle, but without adequate leucine, it won't build muscle. Any meal you have, any supplement you have, any smoothie you have, if it doesn't have at least 2 to almost 3 grams of leucine in it, it does not trigger muscle building. So you've got to have consistently leucine rich protein in order to make that happen over the long term. And the thing most people are unaware of is that plant proteins are typically very low in leucine. So if you know anybody who's a vegetarian who thinks they're getting all the protein they need, they may be adding up enough grams, but the reality is if there's not adequate leucine, and there almost always isn't, they are not building lean muscle mass the way they should. And you also need to understand that quality and timing matter more than just simply increasing the intake. And one of the things I think a lot of you have discovered, you walk through the aisles of Costco, they have aisles, literally aisles of protein foods today. They have protein snacks, they have protein chips, they have protein candy, they have every kind of protein you can think of. But understand that junk food with added protein is still junk food. Don't kid yourself into thinking that you're doing yourself this huge favor by adding protein to junk foods because it's not accomplishing what you want it to accomplish. So let's switch from that to what is the energy behind all the rest of this stuff that's happening in your body. And it comes down to a thing called ATP. It's literally like your body's battery. It powers your muscles and your brain. It helps you move, focus, make decisions, regulate your heartbeat. It even supports cellular repair. So every time that you think or walk or lift something or trying to heal from something or manage stress, you are using up ATP. Now, why does that matter? Because as you use it up, it's gone that quickly. And unless you can regenerate it and supply it, the reality is you lose your focus, you lose your energy, things get foggy, you're not feeling as good as you possibly could feel. So whenever ATP gives off energy, it becomes like a low battery. Think of your cell phone. When you hit low battery, you better do something about it, or it's not going to function the way you want it to function. So what you need to understand is that there's a thing called creatine that's like a rapid charger for your ATP. It'll help quickly recharge it, not just for short bursts of strength, but it will also continue to support mental clarity and resilience and recovery. And without adequate creatine, your system will still work, but energy production is much less efficient. Recovery can slow way down, and both physical and mental performance will feel diminished. So realize that we have to focus on having enough lean muscle, that organ of longevity, but to create the energy for all of these things to work together, we also have to have adequate creatine to support the ATP, which is that battery that charges all of it. So knowing all that, let's talk about the American diet problem. What I've called for years SAD, the standard American diet, which is full of ultra processed foods, has huge nutrient gaps, and the impact on health and aging is dramatic and crucial. So ask yourself these questions. Do you ever skip meals? Do you eat on the run? Do you eat meals over the kitchen sink? Do you eat in a fast food restaurant maybe a little too often? And how many times in a day do you put something in your mouth and say to yourself, I probably shouldn't do this, but you do it anyway? Because the reality is, if you answer yes to any of those, there's a high probability that you're not getting adequate nutrients in your diet to achieve optimum health. It is difficult, if not impossible, because the reality of the American diet is that most Americans are overfed and undernourished. They eat lots of high calorie but low nutrient foods. Too many big portions of refined carbs and sugars and industrial seed oils, and that low intake of quality protein and fiber and vitamins. Guess what? It adds up, and it adds up pretty fast. And at some point in the very near future, we're going to talk about the landmark study and what the implications of that are over the long term. So let's think about what are the gaps we need to close in nutrition today in the typical American diet, knowing that most diets fall short of key nutrients, especially omega-3 fatty acids, digestive support. Because given the foodstuffs we have, given the lifestyle choices and patterns that we have, without daily nutritional supplementation to support all the things we've talked about, it's almost impossible to have the energy we want to have, the focus, the health, and the longevity over a long period of time. And one of the things you have to realize is that consistency beats intensity every single time. There are many of you on this call tonight, including Aldana and I, that our breakfast has been a smoothie with high protein and lots of leucine, added creatine to it, and a handful of vitamins, knowing that if we close those gaps in our diet over the long term, we're going to be dramatically healthier than the average American. I turn 80 years old in a month. I have no health issues. I take no prescription drugs, and I guarantee you that does not describe the average 80-year-old in this country. So just know that if we want to live younger longer, we've got to support cellular energy with smart nutritional strategy and routines. We have to prioritize protein. We have to be very conscious of having adequate creatine to develop that ATP for energy and focus, and build a daily nutrient foundation that's going to support strength, focus, and longevity over the long haul. And that would explain why there are many of you on this call who are doing extremely well as you age, who have been in this company 30, 40, and 50 years, just like we have.
Wow. Yeah.
Thoughts, comments, questions?
Oh, I mean, that was great.